How did a small island nation, thousands of miles away, conquer one of the richest civilizations on Earth? India in the 1600s was not weak. It was wealthy, powerful, and globally respected. Its textiles were world famous. Its spices were priceless. Its kingdoms were grand. Yet, within 200 years, Britain controlled nearly the entire subcontinent. This wasn't a simple invasion. It wasn't one massive war. It was strategy. It was manipulation. It was division. This is the story of how traders became rulers, and how India slowly slipped from empire to colony. In 1600, Queen Elizabeth I granted a royal charter to the British East India Company. Its goal was simple: trade with the East for spices, silk, cotton, and tea. At that time, India was ruled by the powerful Mughal Empire. Under emperors like Akbar and later Aurangzeb, the Mughal Empire was one of the richest states in the world. European merchants were eager to access its markets. The British did not arrive as conquerors. They came as humble traders. They requested permission to set up trading posts, known as factories, in coastal cities like Surat, Madras, and later Bombay and Calcutta. Initially, they depended completely on the goodwill of Indian rulers. They paid taxes and followed local laws. Their ships carried silver into India because European goods were not as desirable as Indian textiles and spices. But trade meant profit, and profit meant power. Over time, the East India Company built private armies to protect its commercial interests. These armies were small at first, mainly to guard warehouses and shipping routes. However, as rival European powers like the French competed for influence, the company began strengthening its military presence. Meanwhile, the Mughal Empire slowly weakened after Aurangzeb's death in 1707. Regional governors gained independence. Internal conflicts increased. Political unity declined. The British were watching closely. They understood something important. India was rich but divided, and division would become their greatest weapon. By the mid-1700s, the East India Company was no longer just a trading organization. It had political ambitions. The decisive moment came in 1757 during the Battle of Plassey. Bengal was one of the richest regions in India. Its young ruler, Siraj-ud-Dowlah, opposed British expansion and attacked their fortifications in Calcutta. The company responded under the leadership of Robert Clive, but Clive did not rely solely on military strength. Instead, he negotiated secretly with key generals of Syria, especially Mir Jafar. Promises of wealth and power persuaded them to betray their own ruler. When the battle began, Siraj's army greatly outnumbered the British, yet many of his commanders refused to fight. Within hours, the Nawab's forces collapsed. Plassey was not a massive battlefield victory, yet was a political masterpiece. After the victory, the company installed Mir Jafar as a puppet ruler. Soon, they gained the right to collect revenue from Bengal. This meant something extraordinary. A private company now controlled taxation over millions of people. The wealth of Bengal financed further military expansion. The company strengthened its army, hired more Indian soldiers, known as Sepoys, and expanded into neighboring territories. Plassey transformed the British from merchants into kings. From this moment onward, conquest accelerated. After Bengal expansion became systematic, India was not one unified country. It consisted of powerful kingdoms, like Mysore, the Marathas, Hyderabad, and many princely states. The British exploited rivalries between them. If two kingdoms fought, the company offered help to one side in exchange for territory or political control. This strategy became known as divide and rule. The British also introduced policies like the doctrine of lapse. If a ruler died without a natural heir, his kingdom could be annexed by the company. Adoption, a traditional practice in Indian royalty, was often rejected by British authorities. At the same time, the company's army grew stronger. Interestingly, most soldiers were Indian sepoys commanded by British officers. Indians were used to expand British control over other Indians. Major wars were fought against Mysore under Tipu Sultan and against the Marathas. Gradually, these powers were defeated. By 1850, the East India Company controlled most of India either directly or indirectly. Railways and telegraphs began appearing, mainly to improve administration and troop movement. However, Economic policies heavily favored Britain. Indian industries declined while raw materials flowed to British factories. Many Indians began to feel anger and resentment, and in 1857, that anger exploded. Have you ever heard of a rumor that started a revolution? In 1857, a single rumor about rifle cartridges greased with animal fat set India ablaze. This wasn't just any rumor. For the sepoys, the Indian soldiers in the British East India Company's army, it was a profound insult to their Hindu and Muslim faiths. This was the spark, but the powder keg had been filling for a century. For years, resentment had been simmering against the British East India Company. They weren't just traders, they were rulers. They annexed kingdoms, changed laws, and disrupted the traditional way of life. The people felt their culture and power were being systematically erased. That controversial cartridge was simply the final straw. In May 1857, in the city of Meerut, the rebellion exploded. Sepoys rose up, and the fire of revolt spread like wildfire across northern India. It wasn't just soldiers anymore. Princes, peasants, and landlords joined the fight. Cities like Delhi, Lucknow, and Kanpur became epicenters of a brutal war for independence. For a moment, it seemed like the mighty British Empire might actually be driven out. But the rebellion, though widespread, was not unified. Different groups had different goals, and the British, with their superior military organization and resources, fought back with ruthless efficiency. After more than a year of intense and often brutal fighting, the rebellion was crushed. The aftermath was transformative. The British government dissolved the East India Company and took direct control of India, beginning the era of the British Raj. The rebellion was defeated, but it had planted the seeds of a national identity. The memory of 1857 would inspire future generations of freedom fighters, ultimately leading to India's independence nearly a century later. It was a heroic failure that became the first chapter in India's long walk to freedom. Thanks for watching. If you found this piece of history fascinating, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories that shaped our world. After 1858, India entered the period known as the British Raj. The British reorganized administration, strengthened the army, and expanded railways, telegraphs, and education systems. These developments modernized infrastructure but primarily served colonial interests. India became a supplier of raw materials, like cotton and tea. British industries prospered, while many Indian artisans lost livelihoods. Heavy taxation and poor policies contributed to devastating famines. By the late 19th century, political awareness was rising. The Indian National Congress was formed in 1885 to demand greater representation. In the 20th century, leaders like Mahatma Gandhi transformed the struggle through nonviolent resistance, civil disobedience, and movements like the Salt March. Millions united against British rule. World War II weakened Britain economically and politically. Pressure for independence became unstoppable. Finally, in 1947, India achieved freedom. Nearly 2 centuries after traders arrived on its shores, British rule ended. The conquest of India was not sudden. It was gradual, strategic, and political, and it changed the course of world history forever.